Welcome back to the show. Well, earlier this month marked the 100th day of the war in Ukraine. While the crisis implicates all of us, it was very personal for our next guest, and that's why she boarded a plane from Toronto to volunteer in the heart of the conflict.
Over the past few months, she's been doing the work that needs to be done, but that few people put their hands up to do. She joins us in studio today. Ivanka Siolkowsky, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me again.
What compels a person when there is a crisis? I think we respond in different ways and do different things. Your response was to get on that plane and go to Ukraine. What compelled you to do that?
In short, the answer is I am of Ukrainian descent. Those are my people. And so it was never a question of if I will go. It was a matter of when. Wow. And there were so many, I think most Ukrainians that I know wanted to hop on that plane.
Yeah.
But not everybody could. Most of my friends my age have small children, they're married, they have a job where they don't call the shots. I am none of those things. I have my own business, my time is my own, I'm not married, I don't have children. So I wasn't just going for myself, I was going for all of those who wanted to go as well, but weren't able to.
You know, a lot of times when we hear volunteer work, even in a crisis zone or not, sometimes people go as part of a larger organization. But you didn't do that. You kind of just decided, I'm going on my own. So give us a sense of the kind of work that you went, when you landed, what kind of work were you doing on the ground?
At first, I was in Poland, so I was helping mostly unaccompanied minors cross the border. There were so many small children whose parents were sending them with a phone number in their hand saying, please get to safety. Call us when my child makes it across the border. And so the reason I went on my own and didn't attach to an organization is because there's a lot of red tape, which exists for a reason, I understand that, but I was able to do what I needed to do in the moments and not answer to anyone but myself and whoever it was I was helping. So at the beginning, I was doing that. Later on, I was in Ukraine full-time, doing anything and everything. One day, rebuilding a roof of a house that was bombed. The next day, teaching self-defense to children, moving dead bodies. Like, the things that, like, I was building stairs. This is the photo of me building stairs at a church. Like, it was whatever needed to be done, I was just in a robot mode, and I did.
Wow. You spent weeks helping Ukrainians cross over the border into Poland. And this photo of you holding a baby got a lot of media attention. And the press actually incorrectly labeled you as a refugee mother. But can you tell us about the interaction that came just before this photo was taken?
Yes, so there are so many variations of this photo. I carried a lot of babies. That was a very common thing. You know, these women, you have to remember, they just left their husbands, whom they may not ever see again. They have their children in tow, babies, toddlers. This woman had 3 small children. They arrive at the border, and there are so many volunteers who have a good heart, want to help. And one of the soldiers reached out and said, can I help with your baby? And she, you know, a foreign soldier and Ukrainians doesn't really go, you know, hand in hand. So she held on to him tighter and ran the other way. And at the time, it was so cold out, so I was wearing my long sleeve jacket with a Canadian patch on it and a Ukrainian scarf. And she looked at me and with tears in her eyes, handed me the baby and said, can you take him? He's heavy. Like, I can trust you. You're a woman, you're Canadian, you're wearing and I speak the language, which a lot of volunteers didn't. And so I grabbed that baby and we went for a walk. I made sure they found safe travel. Human trafficking was on the rise there. So my job was to make sure that everyone made it where they needed to be safely in a safe way.
My gosh, you mentioned that some of the earliest work you did was helping unaccompanied minors to cross into safer places. We've seen so many faces of children in this. What are the stories that they told you and how are they coping? This is just, I would imagine, for anybody beyond comprehension or trying to make sense of, but what were you hearing from the kids?
The kids are so resilient. I learned so much from them. Like I was in a bomb shelter with a bunch of children, and the first couple of weeks, every time the air raid siren went off, they knocked on my door to make sure, like, okay, Ivanka, we gotta go. Let's go, do you want a blanket? And they are taught at a very early age that this is what's happening. They're not sugarcoating anything. Let's get this done. Let's do what we need to do. I was doing art therapy with a group of children, and one of the boys drew a picture of himself. There was a rocket and a cat. And I said, tell me about this. And he said, we used to have a cat, but he was bombed, so now he's dead. And that was it. It was like, this is the conversation. Children should not be having these conversations, quite frankly. But their resilience is something that I will never forget.
So The things you've described are shocking to us. How would you describe your general sense of safety on a day-to-day basis?
I took every precaution that was advised. Turn off your cell phone. Don't have a signal going when you're on the front lines. Make sure that you don't tell anyone your location. I didn't post photos until I was well out of a location, not just for my own safety, but the safety of those around me. So, some people said, oh, you're over-exaggerating. I said, there's no such thing as over-exaggeration in war. It is safe in one location until it is not.
Yep.
So I will follow the rules. I will do it as what I'm told to do by military.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I made it out, so I assume that it was good advice.
Mm-hmm. Good advice.
Wow. As you've been telling us, you've done everything under the sun there, so many different jobs. And some moments that were caught either on photography or other acts have sort of gained this international coverage, including the fact that you were painting flowers around bullet holes, specifically in the town of Bucha, which anybody who was watching even a little bit of news understood that town came under heavy, heavy attack and massive civilian casualties as well. Can you tell us about the man who inspired that initiative and tell us your backstory about that?
Yes, so when I went in, my thought was I'm going to deliver humanitarian aid and leave. In 2 months, I visited 19 different cities.
Wow.
I was always on the go.
Yeah.
But that night that I sat down with this man, I met this man named Sasha, and he told me about his experiences. His son was killed. His son was murdered and tortured. His house was bombed, burned to the ground. And he said, I can't even walk down the street anymore without seeing the reminder of my loss in the bullet holes in my fences. I'm leaving. And I thought, okay, I understand why he'd want to leave. It's not my job to convince him otherwise, but I want to give him one final happy memory in this town. And so I don't know much about fence repair, and there were so many bullet holes, there was not much to be done there. And I thought, what can I do? And so I went and gathered up some paint and just started painting the bullet holes into flowers. And then that turned into, the little neighbor girl looking through the window was watching me do it. And so she said, can I help? And I said, of course. It's not about creating masterpieces, right?
Yeah.
And the mom said, oh, she's going to ruin it. I said, no, she's not. This is joy. This is the point of what I'm trying to do. And so from there, one neighbor, the other neighbor, and then the whole block now has flowers over their bullet holes.
Wow. Ivanka, what would you say is the biggest difference between what we see in the media happening in Ukraine and then what you've seen?
I would say it's a lot worse.
Really?
I thought I was prepared.
Yeah.
I thought, I've seen it all. We see the videos, when you're there in person, I remember the first time I saw an actual tank, I almost vomited because you don't realize the scale of it all until you're in it. Being inside a house that was completely bombed and there's nothing around. This used to be someone's home. This used to be where they raised their family. And so those are images, I've seen things that I'll never unsee.
Yeah.
That you don't even see in the news. And so I'm learning to kind of figure out how to deal with that.
And I think that's naturally where my next question comes from, is the trauma that you have witnessed, the trauma of others that you have witnessed. Let's talk about mental health for a moment here.
Yeah.
And how are you doing and how are you coping through all of this?
Truthfully, I'm not doing so great. When I was out there, I was in robot mode. It was like, get her done, do what you need to do. A lot of us talked about that, how we weren't really thinking about what we were doing. We were just doing what needed to be done. But coming home to Toronto, where we are so privileged, I remember my second day in Toronto, I was walking down the street and I just started crying. Because how do I go back to this life after seeing what I saw? So I will be returning to Ukraine until help is no longer needed, which is hopefully sooner than later.
Mm-hmm. You're going back a third time, aren't
I
you?
am, yeah.
When will that be?
Next week.
Next week.
Yep. I do want to say that bravery and doing it on behalf of people who can't, and maybe, quite frankly, are fearful for the reasons. And I do want to say a thank you, and the fact that I just want to say, anecdotally, for someone to recognize the Canadian flag as a safe place, speaks to how privileged and lucky we really are being here. Would you agree with that?
I would agree very much so. Yes.
Yeah.
Can you also quickly tell us, for Canadians who can't jump on a plane, what can we do?
For starters, keep the conversations going. The war is not over. So I want to thank you for having me, because this is keeping that conversation going. It's not in the media as often. And secondly, if you're sitting at home wondering, what can I do? Donations.
Donations.
And please be careful with where you donate, because scammers, they're everywhere, right? So if you want trusted sources, you can go to my Instagram, which is Tidy Moose, and I have lists of organizations that I work with, or that I know people who work for them, and I know where the money is going. And so that would be
firsthand,
the best.
know.
I know, I've seen the results with my own eyes. So for what that's worth.
Yeah, that's worth a lot. That's worth a lot.
It is, especially on the heels of the news that this war may go on for years.
Yeah.
Ivanka, thank you so much for sharing your story and for your bravery. And we wish you the best as you head back over there.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. We are going to take a very quick break, and we're going to be back right after.